Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're joining. Thank you for joining us today. We are here today for the session Better Decision with Fabric and Power BI. So, as we get started, we just wanted to kind of put a perspective on to see how many of you are interested in AI. That seems to be the current buzzword that's going around, and it's the hype, and it is real. As you can tell, even this image was generated by AI. And from what we have seen from the study, 87% of the organization today truly believe that this will give them a competitive edge. This is essentially unlocking different way of doing things. And the challenge is how many of you are still stuck in Excel? So I think that's kind of the premise of it, right? Like this is Paul doing his lessons about why Excel is not a database, and as you can tell, this was also generated by AI, where Paul is
There's a
trying to
theme
be
here.
part. Now, as we kind of move on, uh, the simple concept is there's nothing wrong with Excel. It's just the thing is how we use it today. The simple things for you to take away from this session as we start is not an or question, it's an and question. Question is how do you use the right tool for the right job? And with that, maybe let's take a step back. Let's do a little bit of introduction. But before that, I think this is the slides that covers the simple concept. The investment in data analytics are increasing. As leaders of the organization, do, this is meant to understand the foundations. What we're going to cover today is kind of showing the simple framework on how we can leverage these tools. We'll talk theory first, but we'll actually kind of show you real life as you get on this journey what it means to build the data platform that is ready for your better expert to Excel or generative AI, whichever you want to use. Now, with that, let's do a little bit of introduction. Maybe Paul, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so my name is Paul Barnhurst. I'm known as the FP&A guy. I've known Khaled now for a few years. We finally got to meet 2 weeks ago for the first time, even though we've, I don't know, been on calls together 50 times now or so. And I'm just really excited to be here. I'm a big fan of Excel. I love Power BI as well. And I'm learning more and more about Fabric. Khaled's convinced to help me understand it. So I'm getting there. So I'm excited to talk about it because I see the benefits of bringing all your data together. And I know in the world we live in, it is so important.
So let's clarify something. You are no longer a practitioner. You are have taken the path of evangelizing how to do things better for the masses, but you are not in the trenches anymore.
Correct. I no longer work full time for a company. Now I just flap my gums a lot about what you all should be doing instead of doing it myself. I have 3 podcasts, one on FP&A, one on financial modeling, and one on AI, the future of finance. I also provide training and consulting services to help people select the appropriate FP&A software for their company. So those are some of the things I do.
The reason I wanted to kind of give that background is as your finance background plus what you do today. Luke, why don't you go ahead because he's still in the trenches.
Sure, practicing. Thanks, Khalid. And Paul, nice to be on a call with you. I am Luke Chilton. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Plummer and Associates. It's an engineering firm in Texas, and I've been in the architecture engineering world for about 20 years and in the finance space the entire time and dealing with all of the accounting and finance processes along the way. And it's a highly regulated industry, so the data and the data points in it become very important, and understanding them become very important. And so when I was first tasked with automating things 20 some years ago, one of the best courses I ended up taking was a Microsoft Access database programming course. And so uh, after taking that, I landed on quite a full few ways to automate and improve processes that I was working with. and it has stuck with me ever since. So I'm quite the Excel geek, and in knowing Microsoft Access, you get the privilege of knowing how Power BI's database engine works as well, because they use the same engine. So I've been a big fan of FP&A. I feel like I was business intelligence before business intelligence became a buzzword so many years ago. Some of us really know the data really well. And so I think getting these insights out the way that we can now with Fabric and Power BI becomes great for any business looking to accelerate their processes.
A little
All right.
better than trying to do it all in Microsoft Access, right, Luke?
Yes, yeah. Access has its limitations for sure.
A great tool. I mean, we all used it a lot, but we've definitely come a long way. I've built many an Access database more for slicing and dicing data, but I know what you're talking about.
I wrote my first SQL query or Access SQL query in 2004, maybe. So I got my original thing there as well. All right. So my background, I'm Khaled Chaudhary. I'm the principal at Data Crafters, accidental data professional, more of an hybrid, I guess. The easiest we can say is I have a full decade plus experience in FP&A, finance director, FP&A, and whatnot. Some people say, why do you switch careers? Like, I never really switched careers. Rather, I went deep on the A side, analytics and whatnot. So I swam upstream from my journey from FP&A, started with Power BI in 2016 in its infancy, and then solved a business data problem. And then, no good deed goes unpunished. I got dragged into IT to be the chief data officer, and I had to go back to school to understand all this data stuff and whatnot. Been very fortunate in my journey, and I'm really excited simply because I think when I first came across Power BI, the way it changed the game was pretty big. But now the entirety of things, how fast we can do things and how simple it's becoming, it's actually mind-boggling, right? So from that perspective, that's what we're going to try to share today from our journey and whatnot. So let's jump straight into it. How many
Okay.
of people can relate to this concept of the data chaos? Like the worst thing you can do is to build an Excel file report that everybody loves, right? And
Um,
then you get put on this hamster to be able to get this thing running. Look familiar to you, Luke?
It does, yes. So you can create many Excel spreadsheets that have to be cut, paste, copy, refreshed. Sometimes they even lose the purpose, and so then you want to take that data and report it to somebody else, and then you want to move it, and it can create quite a cycle there of bad numbers, and that leads to bad decisions ultimately.
Like, how many people do you have on your team that they're twiddling their thumb trying to figure out what to do rather than finding team members to actually focus on stuff rather than get the machine moving and churning?
Talking about any team, I think looking at all processes, I've worked again in finance for 21 years now, and anywhere from dealing with manual paper invoicing to automating the process, or even as far as ultimately producing the board decks. Everybody has something that they're doing, and they're using a spreadsheet, and they're pulling it out, and they're doing something. They're cut and pasting. They're sending to somebody else, and it becomes almost like an automation mission for every team you go to, and you start to try to train, and you start to try to teach Excel skills. You start to try to get them to understand how they can automate their own workload. And that's ultimately what the beauty of some of these Microsoft products actually allows us to do.
Yeah, I think, like, again, the cycle never ends, right?
no, not really. But I think, kind of going back a little bit, one thing you said is, as we're doing this journey, we're trying to figure out how to get rid of manual processes. Often, so many of us start with Excel, right? You learn Power Query. Then all of a sudden you figure out Power Pivots there. You start figuring out the data model. Then you realize, oh, wait, this can port over to Power BI. I'm betting Luke can relate to that. Some of the first reports you probably built were in Excel, and then you're like, oh wait, this is a natural fit for me to start automating some of this stuff and figure out Power BI. It can't be that difficult. I can pull a little bit of IT, and we'll start to end some of this pain, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. So you typically start with the spreadsheet. We've come a long way since starting with the spreadsheet these days, but you would typically start with your spreadsheet. You start with your report. Maybe you're going to your analytic dashboard that already exists in whatever system that you're pulling it from, and you're exporting a CSV file, and then you're putting it into a Excel. You're putting it into your own pivot. You're doing some other stuff to it. And then you get it to the point where you're just like, if I can just refresh this data on the back end and hit the refresh button, this is great, it's automated, but yet you can't get that data out. You still have to go hit export, and you still have to try to get it into this Excel file that only works if you copy and paste it the right way, and hit the refresh button in the right order. But then you have a weekly report, and you're sending it, and it's in Excel. But yeah, it leads you to think, how do I automate this report? How do I make it more efficient? How do I get myself out of it so I don't have to hit the refresh button? That's ultimately the goal, right?
And that leads to the problem is we can't scale, right? So question becomes is a lot of times people think that when we go into this automation and whatnot, it's to reduce headcount. Most of the time, it's not even that. It's just essentially being able to do what we need to get done because we cannot scale to fit the demand. Think about some of the information that we do, like how many of you have quarterly analysis package? See, the thing is, the quarterly analysis package is that we just cannot do it on a monthly basis, the amount of time it takes, right?
Well, even another example, we talk scalability. How many want to look at transactions to do analysis, and there might be 100 million? Could you technically do that in Power Query and summarize it in a pivot table all in Excel? You could.
Yeah.
Is it going to run efficiently? Very, very unlikely, right? It's probably going to take a really long time. And I think that's part of the scalability limits is just the time it takes and running into the fact that Excel is not designed for big data, regardless of what Power Query and other things they've done to make it easier, just not a strength.
But I think the secret over here, I guess I'll keep this till the end, right? So start your journey, and if you're actually using Power Query and Power Pivot and whatnot, you're already in a different game, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that for those of you who have not started, go ahead and get started today with Power Query, Power Pivot, and whatnot. Those of you that are in Power Query and Power Pivot, just realize the power that you have now because your tools have gone big time, right? Now, coming from that, right, essentially, a lot of times the cost of it, right? Like the way I usually look at data visibility and whatnot, it's like an eye, right? With the eye, you can make an extra widget or like extra pair of legs go to a different destination. But simply, are we going to the right destination? Are we making the right widget, right? So I think that's where the bigger cost of not having the visibility in time is bad decisions.
Yeah, I think the inefficiency of getting good data can cost you more than just also the time it takes to run the manual report or uh, package the quarterly analysis for the board, whatever it might be. It also is the cost of making a bad decision as well. And so, you know, data integrity is probably, in my mind, the number one thing. And if you know your data model well enough and you know where the data is coming from and you know what it should be, you can almost do some data integrity checks kind of in real time on your own. But if you think about it from any of the processes that exist out in the world today in any finance organization, there's Excel spreadsheets everywhere, and missing a number on a spreadsheet could be a mistake somebody made in their manual process, but it could lead to multi-millions of dollars of mistake for a business. And it's important that the data's there, it's accurate, and it's there timely, and so that the decisions can be made in a very efficient way and it's effective.
I think that's a great point. And if, little math exercise on this, let's just say studies have shown the average FP&A professional spends what, 40 to 50% of their time on data cleaning. Let's say you put a really good data architecture in place, you're, using Fabric, Power BI, whatever the stack may be, but you've cleaned up your data and you have a good process for managing it. What if you reduce that time to 20 to 25%? There's still going to be some cleaning. I don't think anyone has zero cleaning. That's just not
I want to
realistic.
highlight that point. I think the data ownership still belongs to you. It's just
Mhm.
that you don't spend 90 hours kind of running around and then never really looking at the data and then going to the board is like, what does this mean? It's like, oh, let me go back to you, right?
Yeah,
Versus you automate that and then you spend 20 hours making sure this is the right data, what the data is, how we can leverage data. So essentially, we don't have this security compliance or credibility nightmare.
exactly. You can, you're a decent sized staff. You could save a man year a year and think how much analysis can be done in that and help generating to make sure you're making the right decisions because it's not about just reducing the time we do data prep. You can have people do that. It's about what that allows them to do that adds value because if you're not adding value in that time, then go ahead and just be a data monkey. It sounds a bad way of saying it, but
Well, and it leads to scalability too, right? If you have, and we talked about it a couple slides ago, but you can't really scale a process if you have to bring on 5 more people just to run the reports at the end of the day, you know. So um,
That discussion always goes well.
yeah. No, I agree. You can't. Yeah, if they're like, well, to maintain it, we need more people. I've been there where the first hire I made in an FP&A team was as director was the data person to clean things up. I'm like, I'll manage all the finance stuff. I just need someone good with data.
Yeah, so I think as you can see that if we do the analysis, we actually have a different version of the next time I'll use that where Paul's running away from it rather than
You can see mine on LinkedIn. I have my
yeah,
story.
Paul got that out on LinkedIn, so you can go find that on LinkedIn. But see, the challenge, I think, over here, but not really the challenge, we all understand the problem. And this is where we come from, right? So both myself, my journey started that way, right? I was ran out of finance by Excel because I just got tired of doing it the wrong way, right? And my journey started with Power Query, Power Pivot, and whatnot. The first time I seen Power BI in 2016. But as I went through the journey, from looking from that perspective of that pain, from a finance practitioner, leader perspective, and whatnot, there is a different pain that CXOs face when you try to move away from Excel, and specifically the most gotcha moment, like Excel's dead or this or that and whatnot, right? So people, when they try to go to that, this leads to the biggest challenge that people don't see coming. I'm going to give fair warning before I go to the next slide, is because trying to replace Excel in a scalable manner, this is what it looks like. So as I was essentially taking the role more from a data leadership perspective, this is what it felt like. I need something for integration. I need something for governance. I need something for storing the data. And I need something to store unstructured data. I need something to store structured data. And I need something for real time intelligence. For AI, I need this. For notebook use case, I need that. You become chief integration officer, not chief data officer, CIO, CFO. Becomes literally chief integration officer, just kind of stitching them together. That's been the dynamics most of the large companies dealt with, and because of that, it has just been a barrier for majority of the people to enter that field. And that's kind of the reason Power BI is so popular, because it kind of gets you there halfway, right? Just by itself, it kind of gets you there halfway, and that's why it's kind of so popular. But I wanted to kind of make people understand what the world was even 3 months ago. Not sorry, 3 months, 3 years ago, right? Um, any thoughts?
yeah, I think my first thought is the presentation on the slide and all the names and different ways of doing thing. It reminds me of the alphabet soup and sustainability disclosure as well. And you know, if you think about it, the consolidation that's going on there is facilitated by the fact that data and the data architecture behind companies reporting and disclosing things is better. And so I think that this is a few years ago, right? There's probably another one of these that's out there that has a more consolidated view some of it. And I think in our world, maybe we think maybe Fabric and Power BI can consolidate all of this to some degree. And so I think that what we're talking about here is very important. It almost leads to, making the correlation that if we can take these data and analytics skills that we know and we apply to our financial numbers, and we can apply those to a different set and a different theory of accounting, which is kind of a sustainability accounting, we can probably accelerate our path forward there as well.
Yeah,
So anyway.
I think Luke covered this even before we got to here, right? So I mean, we got siloed systems, right? Costly integrations, right? We're talking about AI adoptions. People are lagging on BI adoptions, and for those of people that want to jump straight through, this is so on a technology curve, you can jump. Meaning, like if you are on a driving like a horse cart, you can just kind of go from horse cart to maybe driving EV once you got understand how the steering works, I guess. But when it comes to data journey, it is an evolution, meaning like you have to go from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive, prescriptive. That has to go through because the entire thing is built off one another. So the AI engine, for it to use the data, it's going to be as good as you're going to have the data. You have to have the descriptive and diagnostic data points, right? So from an adoption perspective, this is a curve, right? So and understanding why you kind of look at it from a data platform perspective, and that's kind of the idea. You put that in, kind of start from there.
I think one of the things here to mention, I see this too, where somebody will come up and they'll show you, hey, look at this cool AI FP&A tool. We want to use this, and you think about that, and you're like, well, that's an integration nightmare to even get it to work and run effectively. You have to do all of this first, and so it often gets lost in the chat, and it's a challenge to try to convince a C-suite that, hey, yes, it's going to take the data architecture cleanup in order to make the AI project successful.
Yeah, I often say this is the year of data cleanup. A lot of people are saying this is the year of the agent. And I'm like, if you really want to get value out of the agents, and some people will, but you got to clean up the data. So I think for many companies, that journey still has to happen before you can get the broader AI adoption. It doesn't mean there isn't ways you can't use AI and you shouldn't be thinking about it, but really to fully integrate it and really get all the workflow and agent and the many benefits, you do need solid data and a solid data governance.
Yeah. All right. So maybe for the idea, obviously, this is not a completing contest, right? So we want to kind of highlight the problem we are facing. But the
I like
idea is
complaining.
therapy session. It's a therapy session.
That's half of what FP&A is. It's half quarter numbers, quarter relationships, 50% therapy.
So from that's kind of the idea, right? How do we move from manual process to data-driven insights? And then we'll give a little bit of background for Fabric. Uh, so Fabric in reality is the latest tool that Microsoft has thrown out. And the problem, I even said in the sentence, the tool, Fabric is not a tool. The easiest way you can understand Fabric, it is a platform. What Microsoft has done, they have taken the entirety of their data offering that's in Azure. They have combined that into one platform that you get under one bill, one experience, and things like that. And I'll cover a little bit more on each of that. So I'll just kind of a side joke. If you're looking for one person Fabric SME, good luck. They don't exist. Because even in Power BI, you get specialists, and there's about 10, 15 different entire products that exist in Fabric. And uh, you need to find the right person to do where you are at the
So
journey.
basically, it's the same as Excel. There really is no expert in all of Excel. What I read one time,
I
depending
would
on how
agree
you
with
slice
that.
it, you could have
I would agree.
you could say there's 17 different languages that you can use in Excel, counting scripts and stuff, depending on how you slice it. So yeah, similar thing.
Just a simple way to think about this way, right? You have data in different places. You can get the data from different places into an unified data store. And each of the workloads from AI, BI, engineering, whatever you want to do, from that perspective, that is the biggest concept for Fabric. Now, this one I'll spend a little bit time on. So just to kind of give you idea why it is right. So again, it's everything unified. Before you want a data lake, you want the synapse storage or something like that, you'd be spinning them up separately, versus now in one experience you get one under the same umbrella. If say everything under the same umbrella. And the next one is also important. This is SaaS, meaning this is software as a service, meaning once we spin this up, is there going to be maintenance involved? Yes. But first of all, because it's SaaS, the maintenance is, if you spin up those 10 tools, you might have needed 10 headcounts to manage them. But now to manage the entire thing, you need half a headcount, because majority of it is self-managed, but you should always invest in a proper administration. So that part should always be there. But the idea, because of SaaS, it does a lot of those things, automatic indexing, V-order and whatnot, till you kind of get more advanced. This is also big. The thing that we spin up, I think the easiest way I can put it is, in the old days we used to get parts to the Porsche when we had to put the Porsche together. This one comes assembled, meaning by default out of the box it is secure till you make it unsecure. And you actually have to know what you're doing to be able to do that. You have to go through multiple layers to be able to open up endpoints and things like that. So for those of you who are familiar with the compliance thing in data perspective in the US, the highest form of compliance, HIPAA, that's for the health records, right? So Fabric from day one when you spin it up is HIPAA compliant, right? Uh, the second one is the concept of lake centric. The simplest way I can put it is, the future of data storage from a cost perspective is data lakes, but the data lake strategies become swamps because you cannot use them. It's just like little folders, right? So what Fabric does, it takes the concept of data lake. It's a lake-centric architecture, but you can never touch it. But it doesn't have a limitation that you can have only folders and whatnot. It has the warehouse, lake house, semantic models, everything kind of running from the same area. And the beauty of it is there's this concept of copy, meaning single copy. I can have the data from one thing and be able to leverage. The third pillar, I find it even more important, because as we are working from a team perspective, and this is something I'm guessing Luke and Paul, both of you face, that we have different skill sets. Some people like SQL, not a lot of people like SQL. I mean, got nothing against SQL people, but in the finance department and things like that, you're not going to get a lot of SQL. These are pros that even in the finance department that can linger around. SQL, I know Luke and Paul, you guys can get around, but you guys are not the average, right? But even now, we're starting to get some people that's getting Python and whatnot. And we get into these new tools. Now everybody has to learn these new tools, right? In Fabric, it gives everybody, if you know Power Query, you got Dataflow Gen 2. If you know SQL, you got SQL notebooks. If you know Python, you got Spark notebooks to everything that Microsoft has to offer. And that I feel like is a very strong point for Fabric.
On top of that, if you're in the Microsoft tech stack, there's a lot that just makes sense to be using Fabric and Power BI. Obviously, if you're a Google shop, okay, maybe not. But in general, it's the best tool out there in the market when you take Power BI and Fabric and everything. It's leading the way as far as data goes globally for companies.
Yeah, I can agree to that. I mean, so if you're in Microsoft space already, Outlook, Teams, and whatnot, um, and you do not have like for large companies, very very large companies, they have a lock-in problem. They do not want to be locked into a single company, and those are the situations that you actually have to diversify, and they have reasons for it. But
Mm-hmm.
for major of the companies, that's not a headache, right? I kind of skipped the AI powered thing, but it's uh, it's good to be used in some use cases, but that is still, it's crazy how fast it's changing. meaning before what is to be hype, reality was 5 years away. It's about 6 to 7 months away compared to before, but it is still, data agents are still on the hype phase. It's not at a production ready phase.
And they will require a lot of training once they are ready. So it's good to know and see and test them and start using it, though. Even if you do it with your own key and codes, it's fun to play with the agents. Build one on an Excel file, and just start talking to it, see what it can do.
No, it's a lot like the LLM in general, right? We all had to learn it, and we get better and better the more time we spend with it, and it gets trained. And it's going to be similar with agents. It's not like you can just dump the agent in and the work's done. You do it one time, and you're going to be checking it, you're going to be tweaking it, you're going to be learning with it, right? Think of an intern. You don't just give an intern a project, come back at the end of the summer, and expect it to be done right. If you do, then you got a problem, or you got a really good intern and keep them. One of the two.
Yeah, let me know when you find that intern.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think I want to kind of take a step back and then do a simple framework, right? We all have data. We have ERPs, CRMs, all kind of structured data sources, from ERPs to like even PLCs from the manufacturing floor and whatnot. And then we also got a lot of unstructured data. And for those of you that doesn't think you have Excel file. Excel is not structured data. Once you get Excel file, it depends who built it and how the data came. PDFs and all things like that, and everybody has that lookup table, right? So essentially, from that perspective, we have that data estate, and then we have consumers. And I am economics, so I'll come clean. I'm my original undergrad is in economics, right? I look at things at supply demand perspective. This is my supply, and from a demand perspective, we have different kind of demands coming from CXOs, managers, and analysts, right? And they kind of are doing different things. And question is, how do we to provide them the information they need in a secure, scalable, and sustainable manner. Thoughts on that?
I mean, it is the goal, right, to bring everything together and present it in a way that those folks on the right there can make a good decision. So, if ultimately your managers and your CXO suite are able to make good informed decisions on good data, that's the goal.
Yeah. So again, the idea is we make the manual portion out, right? We like, I think this is where the foundation is, as people are starting to go on this journey, and I have this conversation pretty much every day. Is that kind of balance a little bit on the platform, which I call plumbing, and then essentially the information, which is the tap. Kind of don't go try to build the biggest data warehouse you ever have done without ever looking at if the data, what you're pulling out, is actually usable or not. You kind of balance from both perspective, but with the focus that you bring real time information to people. But and for this is for folks that's on the call from a data perspective. This is not real time intelligence, which essentially is sub millisecond query. Most of us in finance are still behind a month, right? So real time means couple. If we can get people to daily couple hours a day, people are essentially going from 1900s to today, right? Uh, so I think that's kind of that part. And then this is the place where we leverage the time we have gained to make the investment to move forward.
Yep. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about helping the business make better, faster decisions. And the faster you can get the data to them, the better you're able to analyze it, the more you're able to help them make the right decisions. And I'm not saying, we finance make the decisions, we help the business. And sometimes that can be nothing more than getting the reports to them really quick so they're aware of something that's happening.
Absolutely. So we'll kind of go through a sample use case, right? So because we just been in theory, so here's a company called Better Decision Sync, right? They have a CRM in Salesforce. They have two ERPs, to deal with supplier and whatnot. They have SAP and say Dynamics F Finance and Operations, and then they have Excel, which I guess everybody does. That where some of the lookup list exists, right? Um, Now with Fabric, we're going to try to bring this information together, right? And we want to kind of show you how would one go about doing it. And as we kind of go do it, we'll explain how each pieces fit together. So for those of you that has never gone to Fabric, Microsoft has pulled off one of the best marketing moves that I've seen in the recent years. If you go to Power BI now, it'll take you straight to Fabric. So what has happened is Fabric has entered the same place as Power BI, part of the Microsoft suite and whatnot. Not going to go too much detail into it, but let's see how the integration works. So this is a Fabric workspace, very similar to a Power BI workspace. But as Paul was talking about earlier, this is good old Power Query, right? I'm bringing data in from the ERPs in a one way, right? And this is we're showing just a different plethora of ways we can bring it, right? Some of the data we're bringing with the SQL endpoint, some we're bringing with the Power Query. Some of them are shortcuts from things that support it. But again, the idea is we bring all this data and we land it here. So for those new to the data side, we have this concept in data called medallion, which means the data, the fancy part, they will call it bronze, silver, gold, but the simplest way you want to think about it, it is raw data transformed and cleaned. The reason we do that, first of all, is as we kind of brought the raw in here, the next thing we're going to do is transform the data. So the beauty of this is once we do it from this perspective, how many of you have to deal with audit?
I'm allergic to auditors myself.
I am, but this is one way of kind of getting them off my back. So from that perspective, that's essentially what we do is we bring the data in raw format and then we clean it up, and so that way we have a lineage trail over there. And finally, we have the final version, which will say one version of the truth. Here, we make life easy for users. So if you have that technical champion that can take those 5 tables and build you that one customer lookup table, you don't have to get the rest of them to learn how to do it. So they now, from a scalability perspective, when you have Paul or Luke in the organization can leverage their capabilities better. And go ahead, Luke.
And then everybody has access to it. So then the data set, the data model, whatever that you were working on that you found so valuable, I feel like this was kind of one of the key lessons I learned when I was first using Microsoft Access, was, when you get to the data and you can use it and you can build something, other people want to get to the data and they want to build something and they want to use it. And so it's the democratization of the data that you also get, being able to just distribute it and other people can get to what you've built and cleaned and polished and use it in a way that is more structured and standardized.
Absolutely. So the final part, this is the important part. We call this orchestration and whatnot, but in simplest concept is that the part that we built, getting the data, loading it, cleaning it up, and getting ready to consume, it's automated. It's going to run on a schedule, on triggers and whatnot. It will let you know when it fails, right? So you don't really have to get to the office 6 in the morning to get an 8 a.m. report out. Yeah, you should get a notification at 7:30, making sure that everything ran properly or not, though. But
this is my morning routine, and it has been ever since I first implemented the first Power BI automation and report. I get a full C-suite financial review in my email while I'm making my coffee in the morning, and I can see everything that's going on with the business just in one quick shot while I'm having my coffee in an email from an automatically produced report. And it's, it is fantastic.
The other
So
thing
from
about this is it's become right. You see a lot of drag and drop, a lot of trying to make it no code. Is there still technical and people you need to help implement it? And yes, it's not a you know nothing and you go do it all, but it's so much easier than it used to be when you're writing all the stored procedures and the SQL and struggling to figure out how to do it. A lot of it, has been made much simpler. And that's one of the great things about Fabric is it's easier than ever to bring all your data together and then visualize it in Power BI. So I think that's another exciting part of all this is it is becoming easier. I'm not going to say it's easy, not going to say you don't need a professional because you do. You want an implementation partner, but maintaining it and learning it and having FP&A people that can provide real value to it, it's much easier than it used to be.
And
I
it
mean,
changes. So knowing what's been updated and keeping up to speed with it is also very important, right? So even if you were to go learn it and know it all now, you'd have to keep up with it because it's going to change in
Yep.
6 months.
I think everybody should get started to get these things out. So like even like for example, for a lot of the organization, this is already there. If you ask them, hey, I want Azure SQL database and a notebook and like this and this, try to get that through your CISO, right? Versus this one, it's kind of like Excel. It comes built into your organization. You're gonna be a lot easier to kind of get your hands dirty, go experiment and things like that. Um, what you get with the implementation partner is a skill and a scale. So essentially, your learning curves can be shortened and your transformation can be faster. But you don't necessarily have to have an implementation partner. Even though I'm an implementation partner, I'm kind of saying that upfront that you should go try this on your own to understand how this works. And then you get an implementation partner to leverage their skill or their scale.
And the speed, I think, is also important. So, I could go sit and spend a couple of weeks and build out something that looked fantastic, right? Or maybe it'll take me a month, but I don't have the time to do that. So having somebody with the knowledge, and you also have the same common language, and you can sit and say, this is what we need, and develop it in record time versus trying to go develop it on your own is also important. I think having that common language, like you said, learn it enough that you can know what you're talking about. I think is also helpful. And then you won't help with. And I would also say that it's good to have a second set of hands, any project where you need somebody to check to make sure it's going to be consistent, accurate, it's always up, it's always running. So it's good to have not just one person in the organization trying to build all this out and keep it up and running.
All right, let's kind of run through this. I kind of already see like two questions that I really want to get to. I love the questions that's coming. Let
Yeah, I
me
was just
kind
going to
of
mention that we have some great questions there.
so let's kind of. But for those of you that haven't used Power BI, it is think about the market leader for business intelligence right now. This is really good for the interactive click and dynamic dashboarding. That's kind of the easiest way I can put it, right? So I mean, uh, I don't consider this fancy anymore. I did consider this fancy in 2016, but this I some look at as a pure requirement nowadays as we're kind of working through projects and helping people evolve. Uh, One of the few things to think about as you're kind of looking through in Power BI and whatnot is the simplest concept that you cannot find the problem in the detail. You actually have to find the problem in summary. Is what variance is off, right? You can't go find transactions. But the difference is once you have found the problem to take action, you now need the detail. In the old days, we'll be jumping back and forth between 10 report and trying to reconcile why this report doesn't tie to the other. In this case, we'll just drill through the detail, find the problem, take the action, right? So you can have a P&L. Hey, my OPEX is off. Why is it off? It's say T&E, and then you right click, drill through, and say so and so. Paul went to party Vegas. Actually, I went to Vegas, not Paul, but say Paul went to Vegas and threw
I
a
went
huge
to
bill.
Houston.
Yeah, you went to Houston, I went to Vegas. Uh, but again, it just how quickly you can make decision to having the detail and the summary in the same place. Look, what's your experience been on that?
Um, Reset the question for me so I give you a good answer.
So think about this way, right? We need the summary, right? What the number is, or the variance is on the high level, right? But can you decide based on that, or do you need the detail to be able to see that?
It's a fascinating question. It depends on who the stakeholder is that's asking the question. Most of the time, they want to see the detail behind it, but do they need to see it? Not necessarily. I think when you're in the beginning stages of a data project, they're going to want to tie out the number and they're going to want to see backwards and all the detail behind it. But then once you get your KPI set and everybody gets comfortable managing the metric, that variance just becomes a trusted number and nobody needs to know the detail necessarily once they trust it.
Oh, the main thing I was coming from is essentially when we have the like the variance is off, I need to take an action. Now I need to see the detail of exactly which.
Yeah,
So that's where like I really love the drill through concept is like, okay, I found my problem. Now I want to investigate. I go straight into the detail.
that's right. Yeah. So the drill through to get to the details vital. So when you have your variance report and it's showing you whatever you're like, this is showing the up and down on the arrows on your indicators. So there's some negative margin there, right? And being able to drill through and go to some margin details is crucial. And you can get to that very quickly in Power BI.
Yeah, and the final one I think is like the idea of the secure access, right? Like how many of us end up making the same sales report if you have one company with two business units, four regions, and four sales managers each? You need 43 versions of the same report versus Power BI's capability to customize the report based who the user is. From my perspective, is one of its biggest use case that everybody should learn and use. All right.
I think getting to the variance is sometimes challenging, right? That requires you to know your business model, to know your products, to know, why the variance calculation and the KPI, whatever that KPI is. That's also very
And
important for any analyst or FP&A or anybody in the space, really. If you're in a business, know your business, know the drivers of your business. It's vital. Hard to
and
do.
we got to pay some attention to AI, right? So as you notice now, even with Power BI, even if you're staying Power BI Pro, you can configure Fabric to just answer Copilot questions. So like you're running to that meeting, the board deck, you need that one line summary. Please do not upload the screenshot into GPT to summarize it because you probably do not want the world to know your detailed EBITDA. But you can do this securely straight out of Power BI now with Fabric. And it used to be gatekept at a larger SKU, larger investment cost perspective, but from May, it's available at every single SKU in Fabric. This one is something uh, like the ad hoc questions, right? So hey, can you give me this table for this region and stuff like that, right? We would go back and ask for this before. But as you notice, I'm asking like, give me a table with different KPIs and year over year percentage and whatnot. It's told me what it has done, and there you go. So from a C-suite perspective, even from a finance perspective, think about how much time it saves you from answering all those ad hoc questions. Because whenever you get a question from CXOs, it's always priority one. What they wanted this yesterday, versus now they can help themselves.
Will it create a drill through in that table?
Not there yet. They can create the ad hoc tables for
Try
now.
again next week, Luke. We'll see.
But talking about ad hoc, this is the biggest and like I think one of the biggest pillars of Fabric and Power BI, which is Excel, right? So for ad hoc, yes,
Right
teaching
now,
them
I'm paying
prompting will take
attention.
some
The
time.
word Excel.
Like teaching them prompting will take them some time, but if you want to throw down a pivot table, if you notice this is like Excel pivot table, it's just that when we created it on the top, it went to get the data from Power BI, same data model, meaning that it doesn't have to be refreshed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is going to be the fastest pivot table you'll ever build and refresh and stay updated.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of it, right? You're not having to do the VLOOKUPs. You're not your data's all there. You can bring it right in. It's going to refresh every time, and it's great to have straight from Power BI. It's all part of the same system.
And this is where you get into your data sets being approved for enterprise usage, and they're clean and accessible to other people in the organization.
Yep. So at the end of the day, I don't want to go into each of the slides, but this gives you an environment that's secure so that you are safe from external bad players, but even internally, you can give appropriate access without even learning how to code. A lot of these things are UI based, meaning business users are powerful. For the pro coders, they're even more powerful because this is a technology that balances between no code, low code, and pro code. So as you kind of go through the journey, for example, I'm really like what Paul was saying, check next week. I'm kind of checking every couple of weeks to figure out if I, because Copilot exists for Python notebooks, right? I'm just trying to bypass my Python learning curve to go straight to Copilot doing my thing on the Python side. But again, this becomes secure, it becomes scalable from few perspective. Not only the as your business grows, it scales with you. The as your uses changes, like you need something to do different, you need to actually do look at IoT data and whatnot, is the same platform that can leverage the same thing.
So we have what, about 5-6 minutes left? Do we want to wrap and go to questions? Take
Yeah,
take a
let's
few.
do that. This is what something looks like. Let's see what else. Yeah, there's again, bring our data together, frequency, focus on analysis, right? Don't spend your time on data drudgery.
Well, you're going
This is a
through a
question I can ask Luke at the end, but again, at the end of the day, it's just getting the right data in the hands of right people at the right time. And I don't think we have anything else. Yeah, so I'll keep this on the screen on while. If you guys want to connect with us, this is the LinkedIn best way to connect. And let me pop the question from Melissa first.
And before we jump into the questions, just a shout out to Khalid and the work he's doing. It really is one of the people leading him and his company. If you ever need support, he's a great person to talk to. I know Luke's used him, and I've seen his work. He hates when we do this, but I'm going to take a minute and give him a shout out before he gets into questions. Data crafters is somebody you can trust, and I don't just say that because he's a friend. I know that he does quality work. I've worked with him enough. All right, that's all I'm going to say. I'll let you go back to the questions.
All right, sounds good. So Melissa's question is, how is this different, better than using software platform like Cube and other FP&A integration platforms? So think about it this way, right? So let's take FP&A platform called XYZ. You implemented XYZ. The first thing they're going to come is like, hey, I need to get to your data, right? There you're going to have to either create system extract, SQL integration, and whatnot. And then you have taken the data and you have manually built the cube, which is built on proprietary language. That means you have to learn this different tools and all that fun stuff, right? Now you get to today's world and you're like, okay, now I need to run Spark notebooks. Now you have to go buy another tool to do the same thing again, right? Versus what Fabric does, it gets you a unified platform. This is not pretty true just for FP&A, but in general for like a large organization perspective. It's one place that you can build the data, meaning that you do the integration once. All your use case can run off of it. If you want to stick to your current FP&A platform, they can connect to this one and get the data. But that cube that you build that you cannot change without their help, Power BI semantic model is a cube itself, meaning now the power moves more back towards you. This is very good for analytics perspective, right? But now the FP&A tool solves one more problem, which is the planning, that essentially changing the numbers on top of it. Fabric doesn't do that natively. There are tools, and if you find Paul's website, there is a guide that we actually wrote how to do planning on top of Power BI that you can go find, that we both of us co-wrote. But in general, the way you want to think about it is that instead of having these small islands, you can have one continent that everything's built in the same place. That's more business user friendly and business friendly, at least in my definition. Your thoughts, Paul, because you live this thing day in, day
Yeah,
out.
I mean, I think the key difference is this is a data platform for the entire company. It's a way to bring all your data together. You can plan on top of it, and I'll share a link here. You can also get a planning tool, and there may be reasons to have a separate planning tool. But you're usually going to be duplicating the data. You're going to be connecting in some way for the planning tool and often for a warehouse. So there can be some cost savings. But with anything, there will be some trade-offs. So I think it's definitely, if you're big in Power BI, definitely worth exploring to say, hey, is that the route we should go? And can we do our planning and everything in Power BI? Because you already have the analytics there. Sometimes they're cost savings, but you often have both. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Absolutely. So there's a good question from next one from Albert. If you What's the greatest challenge of data automation and then like doing direct query and things like that? Yes, there's a reason that the IT does not want you to direct query directly connect to the source ERP and call on demand. So I'm not going to go into the technicalities of it, but the simplest way you can think about is there are technologies now that brings the data in CDC in other format that does not stress the production system while maintaining the security and whatnot. But for a data automation project, is database a must? It is not. But for it to scale and survive, it is. And now the easiest way I can say start is if you're starting from scratch. Like I remember the first time when I brought 11 ERPs together, I had all kinds of things. Some of them were connecting directly batch exports and things like that. Some of them I had SAP run the report, manually dump that into FTP, and then we picked it up back from there. So kind of go with the evolution, right? To essentially, like think about the journey. There's things that you're going to get blockers. You can use one piece at a time. Like if you cannot connect to it live today, get export. Do the export to Excel and dump it into SharePoint and just pick it up from there. Solve the business problem. Use that as a leverage to go back to your leadership and say, hey, we need to invest in that and get direct access. You want the data every day? All you really need to give me is the data access to the data, right? So I think that's that journey works better from that perspective.
I'll also say that it's your data. It's the back end of your system. You should know the data. You should have access to the data too. And if you're in an FP&A space, you're looking for read-only data. You don't need to push back transactions. You don't need to write to the SQL source. A lot of ERPs in today's world also have a separate lake or access to a read-only version of the data tables that you might be able to get access to. So yes, there are limitations typically in an organization, a big organization, when you're trying to get to data so you can run a data automation project. So you definitely want to check in with your CTO and your technology folks to get access, but you should be able to get access to your data so that you can run your models.
Agreed. And one thing to keep in mind is, right, sometimes there's legal reasons. ERP, public companies, accounting, they can't give you live access or allow you to potentially make any risk to ERP. So like you said, often it's a data lake or it's somewhere where they run a read only that you can access to understand it. That's usually kind of best practice for a host of reasons.
So like yeah. So I think the question from Jake is I kind of like it that figure out where you are in the journey and take the next step. Let's see. And then there is I'm gonna there is this is a technical question, but for getting data from Fabric to Power BI, there is no gateway required. However, if your data is behind on-prem or something like that, to get the data into Fabric, you'll need the gateway, and it'll use the same Power BI gateway. But that's the beauty of it. Once the data is in there, no gateway required. It's under full encryption at rest and transit and all that fun stuff. The last one is probably DAX. You don't have any DAX limitations on Power BI because Power BI is still good on Power BI. If you want to use Direct Lake, which is a fancier version of Power BI, that has some DAX limitation because that's kind of new and whatnot.
Yeah, and I'd say the biggest DAX limitation is just our ability to figure out how to do the complex calculations.
And again, from that perspective, start simple, right? From that journey perspective, I think coming back to the original point that maybe this is a question for Luke. I truly feel what is to take years takes months now. What is to take months takes weeks now. What's your experience? Because you have, it's not just the first, like we have worked with together and to do this in Fabric and Power BI over the last year or so, but you have done it before. It's not like this is the first time you have done it. This is something you have done it before already. Question is, what was the difference with this new technology?
I was lucky, so I did do it, but I did it over 20 years, right? So it took that long to get to the point where you had a successfully built automated financial model where I knew the ins and outs of the business model, the data, the ERP, the architecture, everything in between. So that was one thing that greatly accelerated the project. But just having the ability to then connect and build from scratch, just because we knew the technology existed and the capability to be able to do it, we were able to implement the Fabric project in 3 months. And so, on top of that, there's data cleaning, there's stuff that will continue to go. And now there's new reports, there's new metrics, there's new KPIs, there's new things to look at, which is fantastic. But the speed to get us to a project that was production ready, it took 20 years before, is one way to look at it.
Well, I think it was a marriage of both sides because coming both from your experience knowing the data and for us knowing the technology, it was, I think this is the fastest deployment, even my perspective, because the technological part, what used to be complicated, but it's still from a achievement perspective, if you know what you're doing, it's easy. Knowing the data part, it takes the experience. So I think that's from that perspective. The technology is now in a very exciting spot where we can bring the technology and expertise together to create value for businesses very quick, very fast. Any parting thoughts? I think that's all we have.
Thank you both for allowing me to attend today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Been a
All right,
joy to
thank
be
you,
on with
everyone.
both of you.
Do
Thanks,
you have any more
everyone.
questions?
There's
We
one
got-
last one, I think, from Melissa, real quick, if you want to address it, and then we'll.
So the beauty of Fabric is that you get to have your cake and eat it too. Meaning you can have the data stored in a raw lakehouse table, create relational database on top of it, and then build a semantic model on top of it, and it will behave like the biggest and baddest, the tabular engine of Power BI, right? So from that perspective, this is a different world than what it used to be. This is not a question of or, it's question of and the right use case. So that's kind of the great part about the journey into Fabric, because Fabric only has 5 storage data format. You can have a SQL database, meaning like if you're familiar with SQL Server, you get the full thing. It has a lakehouse, which is a Spark engine. It has a warehouse, which is a SQL engine. It has our good semantic model. And for those of our friends that are into IoT, it has a Custo engine. Pick and choose, right? It's not a or question. It's a more of an and question, how you want to use it. And the reason it gets more confusing because you can use one from the other.
And on that confusing note, I'm just kidding. You get to eat your cake, get to have your cake and eat it too.
But no, I think this has been an exciting journey, even for me, coming from what we used to be able to do and what we can do, how fast and how quick. And it comes down to being able to create value. Thank you, everyone, for who joined us today. And we'll talk soon.